Absolutely huge news in the app world lately. A US court has ruled that Apple now has to allow developers to include links to external payment options, no extra fees, no special restrictions. At first glance, this sounds like a massive win for developers, but the reality is just a bit more nuanced. Today, I want to walk you through what this change actually means, why it's significant, and what you need to think about before jumping in. To help explain some of the deeper details here, we're bringing in insights from my colleague, Gavin Dove, Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Paddle. And he's also a former founder himself, so he knows what he's talking about.
As per today's ruling, Apple is now required to allow developers to link to external payment options without imposing any additional fees or restrictions. And they have to comply immediately. So basically, this means that inside a mobile app interface, a developer can show a button that links to a Paddle checkout and allow the user to pay through a web payment solution like Paddle without any of the in-app transaction fees that are charged by Apple.
This update comes after a long legal process. Previously, Apple faced a 2021 court injunction, but was still imposing a 27% fee on external web purchases and using tactics like scare screens. The court has now said no more.
The court has imposed several rules on Apple. The first is it can't impose fees on any purchase a consumer makes outside of the app, and it cannot monitor, track, audit, or require developers to report any of those purchases. On top of that, it can't restrict the way developers choose to link to outside purchases. It can't prohibit any kind or category of app from obtaining the links necessary to make purchases outside the app. On top of that, it can't interfere with the link out of the app in any other way than to have a neutral message that tells users when they're leaving the App Store to an external site.
But here's an important detail. This only applies to customers in the United States. If you have users in Europe or Asia, those regions still follow their own rules. Although Epic CEO Tim Sweeney has said that they'll drop all of their lawsuits against Apple if they decide to open this up to the world.
If you have a significant customer base in the EU, in Asia, and other parts of the world, the same App Store rules that we were talking about before, those are still going to apply to you. But it's worth saying that other jurisdictions, such as the EU, have proven to be willing to take a stand against some big tech companies. It wouldn't be surprising to me if over the next couple of months or even years, we see these same rulings be put in place for the EU or other jurisdictions. We'll also have to see how Apple reacts in the US as well, because they are a live player in this game, to sort of understand how the market may change and what actual capabilities this will open up for app developers.
All right, so beyond just the 30% increase on your margin, what's the upside here? There's a lot. You now get better cash flow, pricing flexibility, direct customer relationships, churn prevention tools. This opens up a lot of creative freedom and unlocks new business opportunities.
App companies who set out web payments, they are suddenly faced with a lot of the burden that the App Store, to its credit, typically abstracts away from app developers. So that's things like global tax remittances, chargebacks, disputes, all of these different small sort of burdens that the App Store abstracts away and actually gives the app developer value for are suddenly your responsibility for the app developer who is doing web payments instead of relying on the App Store. Now, it can be argued that the 30% fee is a little too much for providing all of these services on top of distribution, but they are services that you will now be responsible for now that you're no longer processing these transactions on the App Store itself.
With this ruling, developers now have a choice. You can build the infrastructure yourself or work with a merchant of record like Paddle, and we take on those responsibilities and let you focus on just building your product.
Look, I'll preface this by saying I know how exciting this is. Apple's 30% transaction fee, if you can win that back as a developer and not have to pay that, that is an enormous boost to your margins, right? More money for product development, more money for faster growth, more money for performance marketing. These things are going to make a really material impact on the lives of developers. I would say, though, there are a few things you need to look out for, especially before you start moving a ton of volume. And basically it comes down to this. The App Store abstracts away a lot of the responsibilities that you will now have to shoulder if you switch to web payments and use a traditional payment service provider. So you can have a very, very similar sort of user experience as an app developer using Paddle that you did with the App Store. You don't have to worry about taking on all of those burdens around chargebacks, disputes, fraud, which is actually really huge for a lot of the really big players, global tax remittances, especially if you're above revenue thresholds in countries that aren't afraid to go after companies that are making a lot of money on the internet. Paddle basically takes care of all of these things for you as a merchant of record. So you can basically have the exact same experience you had on the App Store and keep all of your resources, your engineering team, your product team, your finance team, focused on what you're really good at.
When you move payments to the web, you're not just lifting burdens, you're unlocking a whole new world of flexibility. I mean, think custom billing models, creative pricing strategies, and offers that the App Store simply just wouldn't let you run. Gavin dives into all kinds of experiments this opens up and how they can help you optimize and grow.
The App Store imposes extremely strict rules and regulations around what types of pricing and packaging and billing models you're able to use. You can either do a free trial or a discounted trial, basically only those two things. And the App Store has extremely strict regulations on how that paywall is designed, the length of those trials, everything like that. What's cool with doing this on the web is you have total freedom to design your billing model and your pricing in any way you want. And one really good example of that is the guaranteed money back trial. So instead of offering users a free trial where they can choose at the end whether they want to continue paying for it or not, you can instead offer them a situation where they put their credit card in and they start paying right away. But if they're not satisfied, you're guaranteed to give their money back. And that increases your conversion right out the bat. You don't have to worry about users making a decision point a week from now. That is currently restricted from the App Store, but it's a freedom that you get from moving your billing to the web and sort of almost chasing what works best and optimizing what works best for your company.
Here's something you might not expect. This shift might actually end up being good for Apple long term. Phil Carter pointed this out to me in an exchange I had with him on LinkedIn. This change could unlock whole new app categories like niche subscription apps, microtransaction tools, or pro apps that weren't actually viable under the old model. This is going to be more innovation, more spending, more long-term ecosystem growth for Apple. But the biggest takeaway is that it's time to experiment. You got to run tests comparing web versus app monetization. You got to try different models, bundles or promotions, optimize checkout flows, and of course, explore retention strategies that only work on the web. This is an extremely exciting moment, but it's also one that comes with a lot of responsibility. So whether you go independent or partner up, the key is to understand what you're taking on. And a big thanks to Gavin, our senior product marketing manager here, for sharing his insights. And if you have questions or you want to share how you're approaching this, make sure you drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts.